What's going on, everybody? You have Tone here, and welcome to my draft analysis for season number 2 of Low Tier Mayhem. If you guys missed the draft league content, be sure to leave a like and consider subscribing, as I am on my way to getting to 1,000 subscribers. But on to the team itself. It's been a while since I uploaded any draft league content to my channel, since the SPL season is currently in playoffs, and unfortunately we missed it. So we're on to another league, and this time we are running it back here in Low Tier Mayhem. We took part in season 1, where we finished respectfully 4-4, but unfortunately that wasn't good enough to make it to playoffs. This time around, though, we are going to be trying to run it back with a different team and a different set of rules. So how those rules work here, as opposed to what happened season 1. Last time, season number 1, all teams only had one Pokemon to choose as the Terra Captain that could terrestrialize into any type they choose. This time around, there are different rules. There are only going to be 100 points for every coach to draft between 9 and 11 Pokemon. And of those Pokemon, you can have up to 2 to 3 captains be your Terra Captain, as long as they fit a Terra tax budget of 24 points. And whether or not your Pokemon can terrestrialize or not will depend on whether or not will increase in value depending on how well they function with terrestrialization. Of course, there are some Pokemon that cannot terrestrialize altogether, which won't affect their point values at all. So I did a bit of a how to draft series for a low tier perspective, and just to quickly break down or run through what I normally use for how I draft for a low tier perspective, it's more or less how I give my templates on how to draft for standard draft league format. The only thing that's really different between these rules and roles for low tier and for standard is more so the necessity of having a flying resist, because the lower you go in tiers for low tier as opposed to standard, the more prominent flying type Pokemon become, because all those prominent resists like rock and steel type Pokemon become very, very hard to come by. So having the ability to have a flying resist, I feel like, is going to be paramount to making your team function as well as possible. But everything else here you see, with the exception being the last part with the Fire, Water, Grass, Dragon, Steel, Fairy Core, that's kind of thrown out the window because you could just terrestrialize to make up for whatever type you're lacking, and the whole Terra won't play a factor, and the Balance and Defensive Core, usually that just comes from not only from experience, but also just comes from what you draft and how you go about your team. But other than that, though, having the priority options is always great for revenge killing. 2 Stealth Rockers, because having one just makes you very, very predictable when it comes to building, although some people can deal with only having one. Hazard stacking with spikes and toxic spikes are always good, just to chip down your opponent even quicker. Hazard removal is always great, having at least a rapid spinner or a defogger, although defog with spike stack is very, very detrimental to your game plan, but it can be worked around with some proper building. 2 Pokemon with a speed tier of at least 110. I said above, but at least 110 will do. There's no Latios or Latias to worry about in low tier formats, so you can be 110 and not have to worry about those types of Pokemon. But having at least 2 Pokemon faster than 110 is at least what I try to go for when it comes to building for low tier. 1 Wall Breaker, that's easy to come by, because normally there are some hard-hitting Pokemon in low tier that makes getting a Wall Breaker pretty easy to do. Ground immunity is always great to have, since you don't want your entire team weak to Earthquake. Electric immunity, you don't want your team to be Volt switched around to hell and back. Bulky Water, I still stress having a Bulky Water, since water is one of the best defensive typings in the game. A grounded poison type, toxic spikes won't really come up that much, but just being immune to having the option to have the grounded poison so toxic spikes doesn't play a factor is still a great idea to have for any draft. I already talked about the flying resist, because flying is really, really good the lower down you go in lower tier draft. A ghost type is nice just to have the ability to block rapid spin and just being like a fighting immunity in general. At least one knockoff user, since knockoff is like one of the best moves in the game, and removing items from your opponent is just so paramount to have. And then the fast taunt and encore user is just good to disrupt your opponent's plan in and of itself. So with that out of the way, jumping into my own team team here. I know they're rambling for about 5 minutes regarding this. So just to quickly run down my own draft for Season 2 of Low Tier Mayhem, I had the 5th pick in the draft out of 16 coaches, and instead of focusing on one particular Pokemon, I decided instead, with my round 1 pick, to grab the best Pokemon available and try to work from there. So with my round 1 pick, number 5 overall, we have ended up snagging up Terrakion. So normally Terrakion is a Pokemon that you really want to see in a low tier format, but considering the power creep that's happened in the generation, Terrakion fits right at home here in low tier format. Having the unique rock and fighting type attributes, typing is just really nice. Not many Pokemon wants to come in and deal with a 129 base attack, Stone Edge, close combat, especially if it's like Swords Dance or Choice Band. The only downside of Terrakion is it did lose Rock Polish, but outside of that though, it's still a formidable Pokemon in low tier format. Terrakion, obviously, it cannot Terrasilize, which would make it even more broken, but regardless of the stuff that it lost, Terrakion is still a fantastic Pokemon and a really good start for my draft, having a good overall solid physical attacker to work with, especially having good attack and some pretty good speed at 108. But obviously though, I do have to make up for its flaws in the fact that it cannot get past some bulkier Pokemon like bulky Psychics, Ghost type Pokemon, Ground types, that it can really struggle with. So ideally, my initial plan with Terrakion was to pair it with something like Terra Gyarados. That was my original plan. Unfortunately, Gyarados got sniped before it got back to me for round number 2, so instead of focusing my attention on I'm just going some balls to the wall offense, I decided instead to shift my attention and make it easier to get Terrakion in and out in favorable matchups. So by doing that, the first thing I had to do was snag up for my round 2 pick, that being Slowking. Slowking is one of the best bulky waters in low tier format just because it's overall, being a bulky water is already great as it is, and being a psychic type Pokemon on top of that gives it the ability to not only deal with opposing fighting type Pokemon, giving it another means of dealing with fighting type Pokemon, which are also a prominent factor in low tier, although it is weak to knockoff, but it can utilize its good defensive bulk here to make it so it's not that paramount in terms of dealing with knockoff, especially in conjunction with Terrakion, which will get a justified boost on top of that. And then regarding having great ability and Regenerator healing up itself, and then of course Slack Off for recovery, Scald, Future Sight plus Fighting type is always a great combination, since the Dark type Pokemon can't really freely come in. If they want to come in on Terrakion to be immune to deal with Future Sight, they have to take a close combat to the face. So a really good 1-2 combination here, having the good hard-hitting Wall Breaker in Terrakion paired with the good slow momentum with Slowking, and Chilly Reception is just great momentum, especially for a Pokemon like Slowking. Getting in my Wall Breakers for essentially free is always fantastic. And it even gets other utility moves like Thunder Wave, and can even go for like Trick Room options if I want to make it more of an offensive win condition. So that is Slowking for round number 2. Round 3, I wanted to immediately focus on getting my speed elements, because I feel like if I don't get speed early on in the draft, I'm going to regret it going as I go through the draft down the line. So round 3, I decided to snag up Ribombee for my round 3 selection, and with this, it's really good because of the fact that it's solid base 124 speed, and its dual typing, its dual stab is resisted by steel types, but I have Terrakion, which handles most steel type Pokemon, which in and of itself is fantastic. On top of that, Ribombee is also a solid Quiver Dance sweeper and can also support the team in other ways with stuff like Reflect, Light Screen, Sticky Web, and even stuff like Stun Spore, Switcheroo for like choice sets, and can just be a disruptor in general with even moves like Stun Spore. So despite the fact that Ribombee may be weak offensively, but having a good fast offensive Pokemon, especially a fairy, is really nice for my team and pairs up super well with my Terrakion specifically. Then I wanted to focus more on getting more bulk for my team, because I feel like getting offense later on in the draft is a bit more easier to do than snagging up bulk. So with my round 4 selection, I decided to go with Clodsire. Clodsire is a fantastic Pokemon. It gives me a grounded poison, so I don't have to deal with toxic spikes. It gives me a ground type, so I get an electric immunity. And more importantly, I have the option of running Stealth Rock and Spikes with my team, easing the pressure off of bringing hazards on my Terrakion. Other than that though, Clodsire is just a good, solid overall bulky Pokemon. Like I said, the dual typing is fantastic for grounded poison and electric immunity. Unaware is fantastic to dissuade setups Pokemon, and of course I have a water immunity thanks to Water Absorb. So overall, Clodsire is a good solid Pokemon and a great special wall in general, and I could potentially make something work with something like Curse Sets to catch more people off guard for more of a potential offensive win condition. Then to add to my bulk, I decided to snag up Incineroar with my round 5 selection, which gives me a fire and dark type, so I have my ghost resist, which I currently didn't have, and having a mon like Incineroar with Intimidate to weaken the physical attackers just a bit, but more importantly it also gives my team more momentum with stuff like Parting Shot, makes things easier for either my Terrakion or my Ribombee to set up a bit easier. I have options to like Taunt, I can SD, Flame Charge, all sorts of potential stuff I can do. It can be run physically defensive, specially defensive. It's a great support mod in general. Even having access to stuff like Roar in conjunction with Hazard Stack from Clodsire. So a bunch of ways I can go with Incineroar on this team, and I'm really excited to try out Incineroar again, as it has been a while since I drafted this Pokemon. So moving on to round 6, to get the final real piece of my defensive core here, I really wanted to grab a Steel type just because of the fact that I have a Rock type, but Terrakion is a rock that doesn't resist flying, so to circumvent that, we picked up Registeel. Registeel is also another solid stealth rocker, so I can bring a dual hazard core of Registeel plus Clodsire if I want to go that route. But overall, Registeel is a solid support mon, can be run Phys Def or specially defensive, a solid Steel type Pokemon, and a great potential win con with stuff like Iron Defense Body Press. Can be a good support mon with moves like Thunder Waves for speed control, and overall it's just a good solid mon in general. I used it in the past. Obviously it had a little bit better options and stuff like Toxic and whatnot, but even without Toxic, Registeel is still a great Pokemon, and Registeel plus Clodsire plus Slowking is a really good defensive core that I can work with. And even throwing in Incineroar just for to have the Intimidate buff is also a good real detriment for most attackers. But the main issue with my last 3 picks regarding the fact that my defensive core felt strong, my last 3 picks have all been weak to ground, and my ground resist at this point has only been Ribombee. I needed to fix that, so I started that Pokemon by getting Braviary with my round 7 selection, having given me a much needed ground immunity being a flying type, and with it being a normal type I have a ghost immunity to ease the pressure off of bringing Spadef, Clodsire, or even Incineroar to take in those ghost attacks. On top of that, Braviary also has the option to be a defogger if need be, as I did want to have some form of hazard removal, but also it does have the option to be a bit more offensive with bulk upsets, which can be very strong, and despite the base 80 speed stat, it can still function with like a powerful Choice Scarf attacker. 123 attacks that is nothing to scoff at, and despite its typing, it struggles with Rock and Steel type Pokemon if I'm not running close combat, but I have a Terrakion, so I'm not really that worried about that, to say the least. But I didn't want to have Braviary as my only means of being a ground immunity, so decided to snag up a grass type Pokemon with my round 8 selection, and I ended up snagging up Arboliva for round number 8. And Arboliva is great here just because while I do have another Pokemon weak to fighting, I did value Arboliva's ability to be a ground resist with being a grass type, and of course it getting hit will activate Siege Soar, which gives me Grassy Terrain, and Grassy Terrain weakens ground attacks aimed at my Registeel, my Incineroar, my Clodsire, and my Terrakion, and provides me with instant recovery as well. On top of that, it also has a very high special attack stat, 125, and it's a good overall solid defensive Pokemon in general, despite the fact that normal grass is good on the surface, but in certain matchups it may be a bit detrimental, especially considering that my ground resist in this case is also weak to fighting, so having Arboliva, Registeel, Incineroar, and Terrakion weak to fighting, but I do have 3 resists, so it's not that big of a deal. But overall, Arboliva is still a solid mon, a good hard-hitting special attacker, and a great fit for my team overall, especially in conjunction with my Terrakion. But I didn't want this to be the only means of dealing with ground-type Pokemon in terms of having a resistance and immunity with this and Braviary, so I decided to get one more Pokemon to alleviate that pressure. So round 9, snagged up Rotom. Rotom may not come up on the surface as being a strong Pokemon, but considering what my team was lacking, it fit the bill. It gave me a normal immunity, it gave me a fighting immunity, it gave me another ground immunity with Levitate, and more importantly, it gave me, with its ghost typing, a spin blocker in case I wanted to bring Hazard Stack with my team. On top of that, it also gives me momentum with Volt Switch. It gives me good utility options with Will-O-Wisp, can discharge, potentially paralyze my opponent or Thunder Wave, and can even boost its special attack with Nasty Plot. So despite its middling stats, it can still function as a good niche overall utility mon, both offensively and defensively, and it really fit my team considering what I was lacking. Then for my last 2 picks, I did end up snacking up 1 extra Pokemon because I did want a bit more speed, because currently the only Pokemon I have faster than 110 speed was Ribombee, so I wanted to at least have 1 more Pokemon faster than Terrakion. So with my round 10 selection, I snagged up Floatzel. And I knew that right away that I really wanted I wanted an offensive water type Pokemon to fit with Terrakion, because Terrakion, like I mentioned earlier, can struggle with some physically defensive Pokemon, specifically like bulky ground type Pokemon that can easily shrug its physical attacks. Floatzel, while its attack stat is higher than special attack stat, can still function as a mixed attacker with stuff like Wave Crash, Hydro Pump, Ice Beam. It gives my team momentum with Flip Turn, can Aqua Jet as a strong priority option, and while my team doesn't really have the means of utilizing Swift Swim because there's no Politoed allowed in low tier Mayhem as far as I remember, Floatzel in itself is a hard hitting special attacker, and it also gives me disruption with stuff like Taunt, can bulk up, so it has its own potential win condition in its own right, as opposed to just being a hard hitting physical attacker. But like I said, it can also do special. It can be like Choice Scarf, Choice Band, Choice Specs. There's really a lot of ways you can go with Floatzel here, but it really works here just because I wanted a fast, hard-hitting Pokemon, and Floatzel fits the bill pretty nicely as far as I'm concerned. And then my last pick in the draft, I figured I had Slowking already with Chilly Reception, so it kind of made sense that I grab a Slush Rush Sweeper, so to speak, and the one I ended up picking was Alolan Sandslash. And the main reason for picking Alolan Sandslash is it's a Slush Rush Sweeper on top of being able to clear away hazards with Rapid Spin. So having that ability to have a way of dealing with hazards, another way of setting up hazards that does get access to Stealth Rock and Spikes, and it also gives me a means of being a late game cleaner in the right situation. The 65's base speed is middling, but in conjunction with Chilly Reception from Slowking, can catch some opponents off guard. The only real downside is its dual stab is pretty resistant by bulky waters, but considering the fact that I have Arboliva, I have Rotom, and I have Terra at my disposal, it's still a solid Pokemon regardless if I can mitigate those issues, and it gives me another knockoff user as opposed to just having, currently my only knockoff user on top of, which is Incineroar, so I had another utility mon in that regard. So as opposed to my Terra options, since I had the ability to have 2 or 3 Pokemon be Terra Captains, I have 3 Pokemon as Terra Captains for this season. My first one was Terra Ribombee, which is really good in situations where I need it to deal with Steel type Pokemon. It can Terrasilize into a Fire or Ground type and make Quiver Dance sets that much more threatening. My second Terra Captain is Arboliva, which was really cheap for like 5 points, which kind of was a surprise. But defensively speaking, Arboliva with Seed Sower is actually really good. I can Terrasilize into a Poison or a Fire type Pokemon, still benefit from being able to take less hits from Scratchy Terrain being up, and I can punish any Pokemon that resists Arboliva's Dual Stab if they are not weak to Earth Power as it is. And then my final Terra Captain was Floatzel. Like I mentioned, I don't have access to Rain Dance or Politoed for Rain Dance, but Floatzel in and of itself can still fire off hard-hitting Terra Water Wave Crashes, Aqua Jets, Flip Turns, and it can just fight its own late-game sweep with Rain Dance. So, yeah, it's a really solid Pokemon to consider in a situation where I don't need the rain. I don't need a rain setter per se to make Floatzel work. It can just do its own work for itself and function pretty well. Especially if I have like Parting Shot support from Incineroar into Floatzel, set up Rain Dance, and just go to town from there. Yeah, it's a really good idea to have like a cheap Terra Captain like Floatzel, and gives me more offensive potential as it is. So that's my team for Season 2 of Low Tier Mayhem. Let me know what you guys think about the team in the comments down below. Feel free to leave a like, drop a comment, and click that subscribe button. As well, check out all the other coaches taking part in Low Tier Mayhem. Week 1 of Low Tier Mayhem will be going up next Sunday, so be on the lookout for that. Thank you guys again so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and until the next time, guys, this is Tone, signing out for now. Peace out.